People love stories about overnight success. The world is quick to praise billionaires. But what about the people who started with nothing? The ones who had every reason to give up, but didn't. Today, we're talking about 5 underdogs who defied the odds and built massive wealth. They weren't born into money. They didn't have connections, fancy degrees, or trust funds. They started from scratch, often in situations where success seemed impossible. If you're feeling stuck, like the odds are stacked against you, these stories will show you it's not about where you start. It's about what you do next. The first story is about Howard Schultz, the man behind Starbucks. Most people know Starbucks as a global coffee empire, but very few know the man behind it started with nothing. Howard grew up in a low-income housing complex in Brooklyn. His dad was a truck driver who never made enough to give his family financial security. As a kid, Howard saw his father struggle to make ends meet. He watched his parents argue about money, and he made a promise to himself. He would not live like that. But life didn't make it easy for him. He went to college, but after graduating, he had no clear path. His first job was selling kitchen appliances door to door. It wasn't glamorous, but he learned something valuable: how to sell. Eventually, he started working at a small coffee company called Starbucks. Back then, Starbucks wasn't the Starbucks we know today. It was just a tiny company that sold coffee beans. They didn't even serve drinks. But when Howard traveled to Italy, he had an idea that would change everything. He saw how Italians treated coffee as an experience, not just a drink. Their cafes were places where people gathered, connected, and shared ideas. He came back to the US and pitched the idea of turning Starbucks into a coffee house. The owners laughed at him. They told him, "That's not what Starbucks does." Most people would have given up, but Howard believed in his idea so much that he quit his job, took out loans, and started his own coffee house. For years, he struggled. He had no big investors, no guarantees, just a vision. Eventually, he got the chance to buy Starbucks. He turned it into the coffee empire we know today. Today, Starbucks has over 30,000 locations worldwide, and Howard Schultz is worth billions. He started with nothing. No connections, no wealth, just a vision and the willingness to take a risk. His story proves that you don't need money to start. You need belief and persistence. Now, let's talk about the second underdog, Oprah Winfrey. Before she became one of the richest and most influential women in the world, Oprah had a childhood filled with struggle, poverty, and pain. She was born into poverty in rural Mississippi. Her mother was a teenager, struggling to raise her alone. They barely had food to eat. As a child, she went through unimaginable hardship. Many people in her situation never escape poverty. But Oprah refused to let her circumstances define her future. She focused on education, public speaking, and storytelling. By the time she was a teenager, she landed a job at a local radio station. That job led to a role on TV, but even then, the odds were against her. Back then, television was dominated by men. There was no blueprint for a black woman leading a talk show. When she first got the opportunity to host a morning show in Chicago, she was told she would fail. The executives believed she wasn't marketable enough. But instead of listening to them, she did something different. She didn't follow the usual talk show format. Instead of just reporting the news, she focused on emotions. She connected with people on a deep level. She made them feel heard. That small change made all the difference. Her show took off. It became one of the most watched talk shows in television history. Oprah went from being told she wouldn't make it to becoming a media powerhouse. She didn't just make millions, she became a billionaire. But what's even more impressive? She never forgot where she came from. She built schools for underprivileged children, created charitable foundations, and helped others rise. Her story proves that your background doesn't define your future. If you have a skill, a passion, and a vision, you can break through any obstacle. At this point, you might be wondering, how do these stories apply to me? Most people believe success is reserved for a select few. But Howard Schultz and Oprah Winfrey started from nothing. They had every reason to give up, every reason to say, "It's too hard." But they didn't. They kept going. This is why their stories are powerful. They didn't let circumstances dictate their future. They built it themselves. Now, let's talk about our third underdog, Elon Musk. Most people see Elon Musk as a billionaire tech genius, but what they don't realize is that he had every reason to fail. Elon was born in South Africa to a middle-class family. His childhood wasn't easy. He was bullied relentlessly. He was the kid who loved reading while others played sports. He had few friends, and even teachers didn't understand him. His home life wasn't much better. His father was emotionally abusive, and Elon wanted nothing more than to escape. At 17, he made a life-changing decision. He left South Africa for North America. He barely had money and worked odd jobs just to survive. He didn't come from wealth, no trust fund, no inheritance. Just intelligence, ambition, and the belief that he could change the world. After studying physics and business, he launched his first startup, Zip2. But nobody believed in him. He and his brother couldn't afford an apartment, so they slept in their office and showered at the local gym. He worked day and night, knocking on doors, trying to get businesses to use his online maps. Rejection after rejection. But he didn't stop. Eventually, Compaq bought Zip2 for $307 million. Most people would have retired. But Elon took his money and invested it all into new ideas. PayPal, SpaceX, Tesla. Each time people told him he was crazy. The idea of a private space company? Impossible. An electric car company? A joke. And yet, he kept going. At one point, SpaceX was on the verge of collapse. He had just enough money for one more rocket launch. If that rocket failed, his entire career would be over. But it worked. That launch saved SpaceX, won a contract with NASA, and changed space travel forever. Elon Musk went from a bullied kid with no connections to one of the richest people in the world. Why? Because he didn't quit. His story proves that rejection and failure aren't the end. They're just steps on the path to success. Now let's move on to our fourth underdog, Daymond John. Before Shark Tank, before FUBU, before the millions, Daymond John was just a kid from Queens, New York, who wanted to make something of himself. His mother was a single parent, working multiple jobs to keep the family afloat. He didn't have the money for college, so he had to figure things out on his own. One day, he noticed something. Hip-hop culture was exploding, but there weren't clothing brands catering to it. That's when he had an idea, to start a streetwear brand. He called it FUBU. For us, by us. But there was a problem. He had no money. So he and his mother turned their home into a factory. They sewed clothes by hand, sold them on the streets, and hustled their way into getting attention. But no matter what they did, nobody wanted to invest. He got rejected 27 times when trying to get funding. But Daymond didn't give up. He started giving his clothes to rappers for free, so they'd wear them in music videos. One day, LL Cool J wore a FUBU hat in a Gap commercial. That single moment changed everything. Suddenly, FUBU was everywhere. Within a few years, the company made over $350 million in revenue. Daymond went from a kid sewing shirts in his house to a fashion mogul, investor, and TV personality. His story proves that you don't need money to start. You need creativity, persistence, and the ability to adapt. But our final underdog might be the most unexpected story of them all, J.K. Rowling. Most people know Harry Potter, the books, the movies, the theme parks, the billion-dollar empire. But what most people don't know is that J.K. Rowling was once living in complete poverty. Before becoming one of the wealthiest authors in history, she was a struggling single mother, surviving on government assistance. She was jobless, depressed, and barely able to feed her child. She had no connections, no publisher, and no clue if her book would ever get published. The only thing she had, a story she believed in. She wrote Harry Potter in cafes while her baby slept in a stroller beside her. She had to borrow money to print copies. When she finally finished the manuscript, she sent it to dozens of publishers, and every single one rejected it. One publisher even told her, "You need to get a real job because kids won't read a book this long." Most people would have given up, but she kept trying. On her 13th attempt, Bloomsbury Publishing finally gave her a chance. They printed only 500 copies because they didn't believe it would sell. But then, something unexpected happened. The world fell in love with Harry Potter. The book became a bestseller. Then it turned into a global phenomenon. And today, J.K. Rowling is worth over $1 billion. She didn't have a trust fund, a wealthy family, or powerful connections. She had an idea, a dream, and the refusal to give up. Her story proves that rejection is not the end. It's just part of the journey. Now that we've looked at 5 people who defied the odds, let's break down what they all had in common. These are the key lessons from their stories. Lessons you can apply to your own life. 1. They didn't wait for permission. Nobody gave them success. They went out and created their own opportunities. Howard Schultz built his own coffee business after Starbucks rejected him. Daymond John didn't wait for investors. He turned his house into a factory. 2. They faced rejection and kept going. Every one of these underdogs was told no over and over. Elon Musk was told Tesla would fail. J.K. Rowling was rejected by 12 publishers. Oprah Winfrey was told she didn't have the right look for TV. But they didn't let rejection define them. 3. They focused on the long game. Most people give up too soon because they expect success to come fast. But success takes years of effort. Elon Musk went broke before SpaceX succeeded. Oprah spent years building her audience before becoming a billionaire. 4. They turned pain into motivation. Every one of them had a struggle they could have used as an excuse. Oprah grew up in poverty and trauma. Howard Schultz saw his father struggle with money. J.K. Rowling hit rock bottom before she found success. Instead of letting pain break them, they used it as fuel. Most people think success is reserved for the lucky few. But the truth is, most wealthy people didn't start rich. They started with rejection, failure, and struggle. The difference? They didn't quit. So if you feel like the odds are against you, you're not alone. You don't need to be born into money. You need belief, persistence, and the willingness to take action. Because as these 5 underdogs have shown, you can defy the odds. If you found this video inspiring, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Now, tell me in the comments, which story inspired you the most? Let's talk about it, and I'll see you in the next video.